Shalom. I want to make a distinction here about the house of Israel and the house of Judah. A lot of people are saying that it's all the same, and a lot of people are just going off on what they believe in, but that's not so true. Now, you take a look at Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 18, when it makes a distinction from the house of Judah and the house of Israel. The house of Israel. Verse 18. In those days, the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel, and they shall and they shall come together out of the land of the north to the land that I have given for an inheritance unto your father. Now, verse 18, it says, the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel. Because, right now we are separate. The house of Judah and the house of Israel are separately in captivity right now. And some of the house of Israel is not in captivity. Most of the house of Israel is not in captivity. And that's why they're going to have their 3.5 years of tribulation. While we having our 3.5 years hiding in the wilderness. And in our 3 years of tribulation, but we're going to be, the house of Judah going to be in the wilderness, in Petra, and also in a secret place. It's going to be a secret place. That's what the scriptures tell us. Also, we know the house of Israel is going to endure it's going to be a lot of stuff going on to the house of Israel in that 3.5 years. But hey, I just hope peace for our brother. So, latter verse 18. And they shall come together out of the land of the north to the land that I have given for an inheritance unto your fathers. But I said, how shall I put you amongst the children and give you a pleasant land, a goodly heritage of the host of the nations? And I said, you shall call me my father, and you shall not turn away from me. Surely as a wife treacherously departeth from her husband, so have you dealt treacherously with me, O house of Israel, saith the Lord. So he's saying right here that the house of Israel has dealt with him treacherously. Just like a woman who treacherously departs from her husband. It says, surely, verse 20 says, surely as a wife treacherously departs from her husband, so have you dealt treacherously with me, O house of Israel, saith Yahweh. A voice was heard upon the high places, weeping and supplication of the children of Israel. And they have perverted their way, and they have forgotten the Lord their God. Return, you backsliding children, and I will heal your backsliding. Behold, we come unto you, for you art the Lord of, for you art Yahweh our Elohim. Truly in vain is salvation hoped for from the hill. Truly in vain is salvation hoped for from the hill, and from the multitude of mountains. Truly in Yahweh our Elohim is salvation of Israel. For shame has devoured the labor of our children from our youth. Their flocks and their herds, their sons and their daughters. We lay down in our shame, and our confusion covereth us. For we have sinned against Yahweh our Elohim. We were our fathers from our youth even unto this day, and have not obeyed the voice of Yahweh our El. Now, he's saying to both of us, the house of Israel and the house of Judah, has backslided on him, because he called us to children of Israel. But you also have to be very careful in making that distinction too, because clearly it's very complicated, and you have to be very detailed in how he's saying things in the scripture, or how the prophet is wording things in these scriptures. Be very careful to read very slowly, and get your dictionaries out and try to get an understanding of what you're reading, because sometimes we speed things up in life and we don't truly get a true understanding of the scriptures when we speed things and we rush through the scriptures. Let's take our time and read word for word.